I understand well why people feel like this, angry at the Federation and all that. And from many points of view, they are right. It's true, the Federation is permissive and just as retrograde as the regressives. But from a more expanded point of view, everything comes out of the human mind, and I try to explain why.
I think you're working on explaining how we're one, the Federation and humans, and how ideals travel up through what was said in Gosha's video. I quote, "Talking about the Federation on Saturn, how is all this related to the Saturn Federation?" And you answered, "Using multiple presents and multiple entry points in the human biosuits and ET races of the Federation. Can it be?"
That's true, but it can be explained in a clearer and simpler way, because I think yesterday I gave Gosha somewhat heavy metaphysical concepts of why. The Federation simply cannot free humans from oppression, because they are the ones generating the oppression themselves. So by liberating them, as the very humans wish to be liberated, the victim mentality that is generating the problem in the first place gets perpetuated. So if they are saved, they will only fall back into the same problem as culture and species, because a problem is not happening to them. They are generating the problem, so they cannot be saved from themselves. They will only fall back into the same again. They must evolve, realize their mistakes. If the Federation solved the problem for them, the opportunity for a greater teaching for humans would be wasted. I know that many will say that my words are cruel, but it goes beyond a simple decision on the part of the Federation to leave humans alone and not intervene, because that is not so simple either. As you know, and although Taygeta tries to free itself from the Federation, the truth is that it is still part of it. So Taygeta and other races, yes, they are helping directly. That is also Federation. But I speak here specifically of those who are making things more difficult for the races that do help. The ones who it seems will not do anything. Those are the ones that concern us here.
How were humans able to generate all this? By traumas caused by the Orion Wars? Where does the problem begin?
The problem was generated in a complex way, and there cannot be a simple answer here that accurately encompasses what happened. But still, there are certain points from where the problem comes. It is true that a trauma generates a victim mentality as proposed by Tsarion and Jung, but for me it goes beyond the simple traumatic consequence of the Orion Wars or a cataclysm. The simple fact is that forgetting, by remaining within the 3D frequencies, creates a feeling of loneliness, creating the I of the person that then degrades into a narcissistic, destructive self called the ego under more popular definitions. This separation then creates a victim mentality and a pure survival mentality, which in turn creates the narcissistic me first mentality. This mindset now becomes what defines the human race. And so they create dependencies on what they perceive as their protectors. First the mother, then the father, then the family, school, religion and government, delegating their internal power and their own knowledge, and with it their independence, leaving the human race in a little boy mentality of pure dependence on authority. But that same authority comes out and is generated from the same point of view of the rest of the population, a narcissistic mentality, which filters the most negative parts of the human race into those in power. Then humans, as a people, create dependence on their narcissists, and the problem is betrothed to the point of collapse that is now. Some asking for more power, others allowing the governors that greater power in the name of a hypothetical security that they can provide to the people.
I understand, but based on that, instead of allowing the wheel and constant endless loop, wouldn't it be better to take action to educate the human beings that today continue to degrade feeding the loop? I mean, I can't make sense of the way that the problem is dealt with.
I also believe that clean, elevated, pure and transparent education, without deceptions, can lead to bring out the best in humans. It is the system that brings out the worst in them. But they are not bad. They lack the education and appropriate environment.
As I understand it, much of the problem is caused by 3D frequencies, but I also understood that they were almost non-functional, so it must be deep within our psyche to continue recreating them for ourselves. I don't know how we can get rid of that. If true knowledge is totally controlled so that people can't access it, it is not easy for them to make another type of decision or approach.
Your point is understood, Yazhi. Still, I can't resist the thought that the game is too disproportionate for humans. First, put them in all kinds of oppressions, of which they are not even aware of because it is done from the moment they are babies, and hitting them from all sides. Basically, their souls and bodies are 100% submerged in manipulations through which they are not able to recognize the truth from lies. And then, on top of that, they are told they created all this. I see it a bit unfair. Almost a justification for not helping them. I mean the Federation, because you are helping. This war is totally out of proportion. And you know it, Yazhi. If not, you would not be here doing everything you do and what you have done. If my dog is being abused because he enters a trap, I help him. It does not matter if what has led him to that trap were his own legs. Gosha, that's the point I have been trying to clarify for 2 days. That from the ground, from the human reality, Federation, Pleiadians, Maitre and reptiles who eat children, everything is generated from the base, the 3D, in the form of tulpas egregors that would immediately disperse if the humanity as mass decided so. Everything that you describe as what is done to humans unjustly, everything comes out and is generated from the base, that is the human mind. The human being as a species, as a collective and as an individual person, has more power than they have ever imagined. They just do not remember it. They desperately want outside help by perpetuating the same authority dependency mentality that created the problem in the first place. When the same humans already have within them all the tools to solve the problem by themselves and in an instant. They just prefer to wait for Daddy Trump to solve the problem for them. They will say that, what can I do if I'm nobody? But even from that point of view, you generate everything with a power about which I have been shouting at you all since I arrived. Yes, it is true that the destructive tulpas that work against humanity are being generated from the point of view or the base, that is, the collective unconscious, which is no more nor less than the matrix itself. So, neither the Federation, nor the Taigetans, nor the Council of Alcyone, nor the Urma with their immense army of cats can do anything about it, because the human being is not suffering from the problem, it is causing it. And by this, I am in no way minimizing human suffering that is real. This is a complex problem, where things must be understood from several angles simultaneously. But those who suffer cause their own suffering, even if it is with the law of mirrors that dictates that if you suffer, you will only be able to see more of that, and so you suffer more. So the law of mirrors, law of attraction on earth, is not all love and kindness. So yeah, humans are in a destructive loop that they have to get out of, but with help in the form of guides. With direct intervention, they will later only generate the problem again for themselves, and bigger each time, as it can be seen now, with the evil that is suffered today that already exceeds the evil of the Second World War, although again, I am not minimizing anything.
Perhaps other races or the Federation helping shouldn't be seen as solving the problem for us and maintaining us as victims. Maybe it is ourselves, since we are all one, helping ourselves from the plane or density where we do have the strength to do so.
Yes, it would not be solving everything, but it would be to assist, facilitate, promote, inspire, then leave them alone again. I wonder if Taygeta was invaded by the Maitres. Would other races also leave you alone to solve it? In fact, that's what the Federation has been created for, to assist and unite against the reptiles. United, not leaving a race alone because they have created it. Although everything you have explained I understand too. But I don't see it as contradictory to helping. If not, what will we still be doing here then? Taygeta cannot be invaded by Maitre because it is not within their collective unconscious in the form of a problem, because they know them. That is to be in a density above the Maitre or any problem of that kind. And helping without it being seen as help, but as something that is taken for granted because that is the way things should be, is the basis of all holographic society, but is not the same situation as the problem on Earth. The Federation does not exist from the point of view of the average human reality. That is the one that concerns us. Whether you, who I speak to, understand more of that is up to you. The truth is that from the point of view of the human collective, the collective unconscious, the matrix, there are no galactic federations, neither Maitre nor reptilians. That is an undeniable basic reality in which the vast majority of the population lives. Your understanding exceeds that, so you are inside another reality, another parallel world, for lack of other words. But from the point of view of the collective unconscious, everything comes from them. Everything is generated by them, and as soon as there was an agreement to change that collective matrix, the problem would collapse in days, if not ours. And this fact is what has the Gates and the Soros and all those old millionaire mummies terrified. That is why they try to destroy humanity before humanity destroys them. Because they are only tulpas of the human unconscious. This collective unconscious is super difficult to reprogram. There is and will be a trigger that will re-establish the direction of the unconscious collective, as we have already seen with what happened with WhatsApp and the stock market. It may look difficult, but it can happen even overnight.
Okay, everything is generated by the collective unconscious, and everything is our responsibility, and we are the solution and the problem. So, everything that is happening could be viewed as being fine, because anyway, the awakening is individual, and even if it's just a few people, they are already changing. Either way, death is just a transition to another point of view of our being. By assisting or guiding people, each one will go through their process and will return to where they want to be. But so, will humanity survive as a race? If, from what we have seen, we have taken it to this extreme, and there is no factor that is going to change anything drastically, it seems that things are looking rough.
From the individual point of view, many will leave the existence called physical in this way, and in mass collective. And that, yes, is due to prenatal agreements, without it being seen as something tragic from the side of the afterlife. The human race will never be the same after this, for better or for worse. On Earth it will survive, but it will not be the same civilization, and at a cost in lives and suffering. However, humanity as such always survives, because it does not even depend on the Earth to survive as such as existence, since it exists all over the galactic quadrant. From the bigger point of view, what happens on Earth is just a local native brawl, without taking away from what causes said tribal fight in terms of real suffering.
How did the Lyrians have within their collective unconscious the races that invaded them? We have also been told of planets with very loving races but unable to defend themselves, being attacked by these regressive races. How were they concordant with such a situation?
As I explained to Gosha last night, Alpha Centauri was a 5D problem, not a 3D problem generated by a different matrix, bubble apart from the base 5D. So the rules don't apply the same. And yes, very loving, but they did put themselves in a self-generated position that made them compatible with the problem. For example, you can't just be love and light if you are inside a collective unconscious matrix without the neighborhood rascals coming for you. Taygeta is a very loving and advanced society, but it is also very strong militarily.
But how did these races, living on remote planets, make themselves concordant with a situation like this? I'm just trying to understand, as for example, the planets Tau Gete, JG667cc that we covered in the last videos. I mean, from what I understand, they weren't surrounded by this predatory collective unconscious.
They were not in the victim mentality of law of mirrors because they had nothing bad to observe before.
Exactly.
There is a problem here. To be able to say why something happens, you have to have a previous framework to be able to understand the next framework of ideas and concepts. The first is that from where reality is being generated for everyone, the galactic existence, the entire universe, everything comes from a single singularity of consciousness. So, from that point, there is no time, there is no distance, no matter. Here, we are concerned with the concept of non-locality. So, any planet, no matter how far away, will exist within the same frame of consciousness that affects others. One race looks the same as another physically, let's say all the Lyrian races, because in themselves they have a collective unconscious or group of ideas that determine that your consciousness will be reflected with this appearance that you call human, Lyrian appearance. Then said Lyrian collective unconscious will pass the same toolpath among all its members, creating a generalized and shared problem among all. Unless individual components of these races, as isolated cultures such as Taygeta, understand the nature of the problem that affects us all, and with it, even if it's just for them in isolation, can generate the solution. So Taygeta already found the solution to the Maitre and reptile invasion, the antidote, but humanity has not yet. Why doesn't the Federation go and free all humans? Because it is not within their reality. Therefore, even wanting, they cannot access the same collective unconscious. It must first be part of said collective unconscious in order for the realities, timelines, or densities to be compatible. It is like asking a ghost for help to move heavy boxes. It cannot. The Federation must become a part of the reality of the collective so that they link, so that it can be interactive. Or else, it is not possible to move, to touch anything from that other reality. Realities are not places. They are ideas. There is no matter. There are no places. There are no distances. There is no time. Everything that makes up the universe and objective reality are ideas. The Federation cannot, from what you have said. But Maitre and other assholes of the universe do not ask themselves these philosophical questions, if they are in a proper bubble or not, to humans. They invade them without questioning anything. But the Federation cannot. It seems a bit bureaucratic. Those who violate can violate, but positive ones have to adhere to rules, whether they are in the same bubble or not, etc. I understand your point, Yazhi, I do. I just feel frustrated because I see it all quite disproportionate.
Very interesting. I understand your point, Yazhi. But yes, if the collective unconscious does not believe in Federation, how is it capable of believing in Maitre and cause being invaded by them, if they are part of the same life of this planet?
Maitre does not invade anything really. The humans let them enter their collective unconscious. They will be Maitre for you, but others will call them jinns, demons, entities. Many names, same things. The thing is that this exists in the collective unconscious, and it is reflected, materializing as the problem and as old nerd millionaires.
How did Taygeta manage to isolate itself from the collective unconscious, although being here present, perhaps not quite?
Not quite, because if someone is enslaved, and it's your sister, brother, you still are too.
You talked about how bubbles don't fit. So, why not expand this bubble? Why is there so much fear or caution for Earth ideas to come out? If, once they do, together as a community, we can defeat them.
The fear comes from the extraterrestrial 5D races that are still ignorant of what I am trying to explain here to you. As I have said before, that fear is part of the problem because the human collective unconscious is part of another, more expanded collective unconscious that includes the fear that the human problem will leave the Earth. I have said that the human collective unconscious composes the Lyrian as the sum of all the Lyrian races. But these, in themselves, are also part that forms another collective unconscious that includes that of other non-Lyrian races. Taygeta is here and would be affected, because the ideas would escape towards Taygeta. But it is not like that really. It is only if you allow it with your framework of intellectual understanding that dictates your reality. So even immersed in the problem, Taygeta is immune for the most part. Even so, there is quite a strong cross-cultural contamination. But again, it is limited to what can enter Taygeta's collective unconscious. So the bad earthly customs will be able to get out, but not to that destructive level, simply because they are aware of it. You said the regressives don't really invade. It's the humans who let them in. Like the low immune system of the human body that allows parasites to enter, yes? Yes, because where the immune system has a weakness is where it will be attacked. But even here, it is not that it is invaded from the outside, but the formation of the problem, infection, is promoted internally, since the microorganisms that cause the infection were already inside the body. Just that the system, when collapsing at a specific point, creates a disturbance in the balance that causes said infection. But even in the case of infectious diseases, it is not an external invasion, but an internal imbalance that causes the problem.
Yazhi, I had this question. The ideas of the humans, aren't they seeping into the 5D? Because by being able to solve things, we're also capable of making them worse. So, with what you say, yes, there is a negative transfer of 3D ideas for the 5D and the 5D ignorance, which has not yet been addressed. But at the same time, the transfer of ideas occurs despite the created apparent lunar bubble. So, wouldn't it be better to expand this bubble and go through a re-education? I know it sounds like Daddy Federation saves us, but that is not my point here. Rather seeing the misunderstanding of the situation from the 5D and the 3D, all this sounds like it will continue to snowball.
Good observation. However, in any case, the whole problem on Earth is already outside the Earth, contained in the more expanded collective unconscious. Just that the imbalance is taking place on Earth, as with infection. So there is really nothing to export in the matter of problems. If a 5D race is compatible with one of the problems of the Earth, as if it was exported to that race, it would be only because they let the problem in, because of an intrinsic weakness or vulnerability of said race, the imbalance, No problem can enter to invade a living organism or a matrix if it is not invited in the first place. A destructive 3D idea cannot invade a place like Taygeta, for example, because Taygeta is already aware of the existence of said potential problem. Therefore, it does not lend itself to having that vulnerability. This is because it has greater knowledge than the Earth, and the greater knowledge, the higher density, as I have explained before. It is having an awareness and wisdom that protects an advanced civilization from being compatible or from being contaminated by a lesser or less advanced one. It is immune because it already knows the problem, its genesis, its causes and solutions.
So if humans were able to solve the problem they are causing, then the collective unconscious matrix of all the other races of which they are part would be fixed?
Yes, exactly. And this answers a question that Gosha asked me last night. That is why so many other races are also so interested in solving once and for all the problem that is on Earth. Because it affects us all. Because we are part of the same, more expanded, unconscious collective. So, for all the races that exist, the Earth is a point of imbalance that causes an infection that affects us all. So it's not that there are regressive beings and positive beings, only from the point of view of basic duality. The real nature of the universe is integration and love. So the concepts of regressive races, whatever they are, Maitre, reptilians, only remain as points of imbalance caused by an intrinsic vulnerability generated by a specific group that turns out to be exactly the one that is being affected by the problem in the first place.
Then, opening this bubble would be possible. It would be an option. The re-education after opening, of course, for that, the infection can be attacked by existing cells, but they must be nourished with vitamins and minerals that come from outside.
Openness in the form of education that includes all the races affected by the Earth problem is something inevitable that is happening automatically as a consequence of the interaction and the study of what is happening on Earth.
If so many races are interested in solving the problem, why do I only see you Taygetans assisting with information, for example, and not mentioning that you get censored by the Federation itself, a conglomerate of said positive races? I do not understand.
Because the part of the Federation that is putting obstacles against helping the Earth is generated directly by the human collective unconscious, being exactly the same. In other words, humans are that troublesome part of the Federation. They are the same. They are on Earth and 5D Saturn simultaneously. This is a confusing part, but I have tried to describe it with the phenomenon of mirrors. In other words, the humans themselves are blocking the Federation. Please explain the mirror phenomenon again, more technically. I have pieces of mirror subjects in various places. It is a gigantic subject. Mirror's topic was explained in the video about DNA by my predecessor. In other words, what is understood as reality in a density is only a reflection left over of something that is more complex in a higher density, which in turn will be a reflection of something higher, being that in the end they are only parts of the same. This happens because from the point of understanding of a lower density, one has and processes less information than in a higher one, since the true nature of everything that exists is consciousness, ideas. But Yazhi, from what I understand about mirrors, 5D people create mirrors in 3D, not the other way around. That's why I don't quite understand why the mirror affects the person in 5D and not the other way around.
I think it goes both ways, as below, as above, and vice versa. There is no one without the other.
Yes, exactly, it is unity. But Yazhi has put the focus on 3D affecting 5D. Apart from this, technically what I know about mirrors, first you have a person in 5D, then your mirror is created on Earth. In this sense, the 5D would be the original, the pattern.
In that case, it would be a mutual feedback from what I understood. Our convictions alter 5D beings as lessons learned. Ideas are exported in that sense.
The problem is that it's not exactly just a reflection, but it's a two-way process, where, in a holographic way, all-inclusive, their densities are affected and influenced by each other. You would think that 5D is the pattern, but 5D just observes another pattern that is higher and more complex. You are not how you see yourself in the mirror. Your true being has no form. You are only light, energy, expanded and unified ether. The fact that you have a defined form, I another, is only because of the ideas that we carry and that define us. So the forms, appearances, tend to repeat themselves, because although it seems that there are an infinity of possible variants for the Lyrian form, the truth is that there are not. It is an anthropomorphic form limited to a number of physical appearances. So a physical appearance can be repeated in more than one place. And a physical appearance occurs because it is an idea. An idea is a frequency. So a person in 5D and his or her terrestrial mirror look the same, for example, because they maintain a very similar frequency. So people with similar appearances share similar base frequencies, although due to the greater separation in 3D, they are limited to certain bubbles of consciousness that in turn create a different way of thinking between two very physically similar people. Base, because even if two people look very similar, almost like clones, they may have different values in terms of complex ideas such as ethics, interests, morality, but they will still retain the base that defines them as 1 meter long-haired blonde men. One Norwegian, for example, the other Taigetan. And the influence between them is two-way, whether they like it or not. The physical mirrors are annoying and difficult to understand for the average terrestrial person. They are presented in the culture of the Earth as doppelgangers, for example. Okay, so through these mirrors, the Federation can be influenced. That's the idea? Is that why the Federation is how it is? Yes, that is why humans with their low collective consciousness stop the Federation. In other words, the humans themselves are blocking the Federation. But they up there are, in theory, in higher frequency, in 5D. They should overwrite the lower one of their mirrors. Why don't higher beings in 5D influence their mirrors more. Don't they have more creative power? Because the greater the understanding of 5D, not everything is understandable due to the limitation of the less possible understanding from the collective mentality of 3D. Could you rephrase this, please? I did not understand. From 5D, you can understand many more things than from the 3D lens. So 5D understands and is influenced from 3D. But how 5D can influence 3D is limited. It is the same phenomenon where 4D does not understand 9, but 9 does understand 4 because it contains it.
The 3D limitation of understanding consequently affects 5D. What a mess! What a knot! And why don't other races join in? The disclosure, the re-education that Lina was also talking about.
Because they are immersed in their own paradigms of understanding. Their ideas, their concepts will also be influenced, but by their own conviction. They do not enter the same dynamic.
I don't understand in what other ways they are helping then.
Only as guides, working through their starseeds. And they do a lousy job, I'll say. They themselves in 5D carry their own learning process.
Okay. Saturn Federation are beings that are here incarnated as starseeds living in the 3D. And the 3D influences those 5D beings by transporting regressive ideas, but repeating the same strategy 100,000 times to solve the problem and never solve it, then they are insane. I do not understand, from their vision in 5D, why are they not proposing better solutions?
Because solutions to 3D problems can only be found from the point of view of those who have generated them, or they will be repeated. In other words, the problems of the Earth can only be solved from the Earth plane, from within, being humans who fix them. That is why there are so many starseeds inside now, because it is the only definitive solution to the problem. That is what the starseeds are for. They are the cavalry that will solve the problem. As I explained above, the Federation cannot come in to save Earth because it is not in its density. For it to be, the Earth Collective must have within its existential framework and understanding said Federation, or otherwise, something that does not exist for them as a collective will not be able to affect them or help them. As an example, I cannot affect the human collective unconscious alone. It does not work. It does not link. There is no entry point. That point are the starseeds. I need to use starseeds below, so that from the dual understanding, 3D and 5D that they have, they can serve as a bridge, so that what I say can be filtered to the people of Earth. Otherwise, they will not listen to us, or very few, as already proven before.
Another point that you have mentioned before, that humanity would continue, but after suffering, and that they will never be the same. Won't this have consequences too? All those people returning to 5D, having passed through so much fear?
Traumas would continue to be exported abroad, perpetuated cycle. From the afterlife point of view, they don't see or interpret fear in the same way. However, yes, they take fear with them as ideas that in themselves, as I described above, are the cause of the 5D collective unconscious being fed more, and the tulpas that affect all races are perpetuated.
If the starseeds came in with all their memories, maybe they would be more capable, but if on top of that, many are programmed not to remember, we are not going well.
They won't remember, but their understanding and essence is stellar. To demonstrate that, otherwise you wouldn't be here with me. You would be doing something else, checking if the Kardashian has a new hat or whatever.
What worries me is all the claustrophobia, stress, depression that the awake ones are going through.
In itself, from the point of view of understanding, the awakened ones are the ones who are suffering the most, and by far, yes, exactly. Because for the Matrix people, nothing is happening. There is a pandemic, okay, but as soon as they are vaccinated, everything returns to normal. They will put on their masks and go about their lives obediently and with a smile.
Okay, but I don't mean that they come to save us. I already understood that this is not possible. Rather, for example, the starseeds entering all with agreements to remember. Or that all the races involved in sending starseeds agree on a single story, a single version. So then, by seeing all the disclosures of true contactees, the manifestation can be unified. In other words, using the same system that enslaves us to free ourselves.
Good idea, Lina. There is a huge number of children who are entering with full memory nowadays, which is why the Cabal attacks them so much with normal injections and now with this one. And how to validate who are the real contactees and who are not? Everyone wastes their time attacking each other all the time. That's why they should come with a memory, with agreements all together, not without memory scattered, and each with different version of things. According to their races and agendas of these races, join up there as much as below, and united before coming. Agree on things at some multiracial council, and enter like an army, remembering those agreements. Because if not, as you say, they only attack one another. They fight for who is telling the truth. That has already happened. That's why so many children are entering, and not only in 3D, in 5D for the same reason, myself included, full memory.
But let them come in as walk-ins, because we don't have the time for them to grow up.
Yes, there are those also, but as you say, they must be more. So in summary for today, the Federation cannot intervene as humans would wish. It is not that they do not want to, but that they cannot.
Because they are not part of our collective conscious reality. Did I understand well?
Yes. Don't you see that as an excuse a bit? Or do you see it totally good of a reason? It's no excuse. It is an existential barrier.
I understand that, for example, if the Federation now wanted to intervene openly, it might cause more problems, because people would panic and end up committing suicide or something.
Exactly, because in the existential framework, in the human collective unconscious, the Federation would only be something like an Independence Day, UFO invasion, with negative results. This because of the mental programming that they have. Yes, but I am not referring to that kind of intervention anyway, but behind the scenes, taking control of the media, secretly, as always was the idea.
Yes, I very much agree, and I think it is necessary for the people to at least have access to the information.
What I don't understand is how we can continue joining voices and soul path choices here in 3D if every time we start joining up, the Federation itself pulls down that disclosure with completely regressive tricks against you, for example. This way we can't proceed joining up. It's like building a castle and being attacked every year.
Yes, but the Federation itself, from your point of view, is nothing more than the cabal that controls the media. If humans alone and together, from the point of view of the collective unconscious, say enough is enough, everything stops suddenly. The old mummies and nerds with syringes would lose all their power immediately. From the point of view of the human collective unconscious, they themselves are the Federation that governs them. They don't know what they need to say enough to. They do not see, because of the level of manipulation that is huge.
Yes, but how are they going to say enough is enough if it is so difficult for them to even know what is happening, even though they have everything at a click, but it is not part of their reality, like the Federation?
Yes, but that enormous manipulation comes from themselves. They must clear their minds, starting from the individual, to affect the collective unconscious from that point on.
Okay, so the regressive Federation, the one that attacks you directly on the ship, your identities, your ships, your internet connection, that Federation in 5D is real, not Tulpa. That one we did not create, but it is the filtering of 3D regressive ideas?
All there is, all that exists are tulpas, egregors. You are a tulpa. I am a tulpa. Results of firmly holding a constant idea, which in turn is the harmonic of a frequency that creates materialization. But it is still just an idea. So, from the point of view of this ship, it does not matter who the Federation is, because it is the same. So if it is the Matrix 3D attacking or the Saturn Federation, from my point of view, they are two names for exactly the same thing. So, is the Saturn Federation infiltrated? Sure, but from Earth's point of view, from Earth. In our case, we are also creating these tulpas, creating with it in agreement with the human matrix perception, not in accordance with our existence, because it is not part of the collective unconscious. Therefore, it attacks us as an immune system would attack an external pathogen. But that pathogen does not stop with us, more obvious components of what is a not accepted part of the terrestrial matrix. But it extends to you as well, since you are also attacked for the same reason. Therefore, for the 3D matrix, collective unconscious, you are us, as we need you to exist there. And those who attack also need you to serve as a bridge to us. I am not saying this from the point of view of recrimination, but for clarification. From the point of view of that 3D matrix collective unconscious, you are us. That is why they accuse you of inventing us, because it is all that the matrix sees. It does not see anything else. They only see you. This is because each one of you here has one foot in the matrix 3D and the other foot in the matrix 5D.
I understood very well, thank you.
So the bubble of our unconscious matrix creation spread like a deformed balloon, encompassing you and a part of the Federation as a sort of a feedback of ideas that in a certain way perpetuates the loop we're in?
Yes, it can be described as a set of bubbles, everything influencing one another simultaneously. But the entire universe is a great whole, and the subdivisions are only illusions from thoughts that generate ideas of separation. But it is an illusion, And when one or more people agree to see things similarly enough, sharing the same basic ideas, it is when perception agreements are formed that are the collective unconscious, the bubbles. Large bubble made of smaller bubbles, up to the basic bubbles that would represent each person or individual, every soul. And each soul is only an occurrence of the source, of the whole. And from here to here in perception will be called Gilberto Homes.
Of course I understand. It reminds me of the movie Inception, where the dream thief is attacked by the dreamer's unconscious.
One of the best human films, one that I have studied thoroughly. I understand that few humans can understand it without seeing it half a dozen times. As in this movie, the collective within each dream reality will begin to go against whoever is creating the reality, in this case, you. Because they are the ones who destabilize the system that in itself would be perfect, as explained by the architect.
Yes, it is one of my favorite movies.
My question is, how to modify this collective unconscious on a larger scale, participating in the divulgation and transfer of knowledge in order to facilitate change in other people, but on a small scale, that is to say, we ourselves are by right, each one of us, that collective unconscious, nothing more. So what do I do not to find myself in this division, 3D and 5D, and be able to change the course of the earth?
You will not be able to, nor will I be able to, nor will anyone. That is why the Federation cannot intervene, because the change, the motivation for change, must come from within, with a process of maturation and progression of internal consciousness, not from without. And for that, you need motivation or incentive. And unfortunately, that incentive is friction, which translates into collective suffering. Verum vident finem noctis. See the truth will end the night. Each asleep person must be aware of the lies that sustain the present problem of the earth. It means that people like you are the only hope for humanity.
But if I am awake, why do I continue to perceive people asleep?
Because your understanding exceeds theirs. You can see them, you can understand why they think as they think, but they do not. You see people asleep because you are awake. You are in their reality and you are not. You will share the same table. However, their realities are different, parallel worlds entirely. You are the door, the bridge between two worlds. They cannot and we cannot intervene without making things worse, because we only feed the cause of the problem, the dependence on having problems solved from the outside, having everything to solve the problems themselves. But is this what the Federation itself thinks? Is this how they explain it? What you say here about them not being able to intervene, is this your understanding of their reasons, or is it something that they explain themselves? Because as much as we can understand this whole thing in this way, their reasons for not helping might not be so noble. No, they don't understand why they can't. They go around with other kinds of reasons, like karma. But it all comes down to what I just said. They only complicate things more, while it's all rather clear. They cannot intervene because it is fighting fire with fire. They will only fan the flames. The reason is what I see personally.
And if the collective unconscious attacks us as if we were a virus, because we are in another reality, how do we continue to help? Because from I understand, the more we learn, the more it will attack us?
Yes, you are the problem for the collective unconscious, as for you, the Matrix people are also the problem, because they do not share the same reality, because they do not belong to that collective unconscious.
And so, we are bridges, doors, but we are not able to wake them up because they must be the ones to wake up. And we don't have enough time before they destroy themselves and destroy us. So?
Like the old saying, you can only lead the horse to water, you can't make it drink it. Therefore, you can only offer other asleep people the information you have, but you cannot make them believe it. For that, they must see and experience what you say firsthand. This is how they are all programmed by the very Matrix. And so they will have to go through whatever they have to go through to realize their mistakes. It is not what I want. It is what I see.
So if everyone's awakening must come from within, interest and curiosity, and you are saying that this is caused by friction, do you mean that what is happening is okay?
Unfortunately, the friction causes them to change, because it takes them out of their comfort zone and forces them to take action. You learn by suffering. That is unfortunate, but it is so. However, it is not necessary to suffer to learn, but that is something that you can apply, not them, because their minds are very basic.
But in this case, where friction is stifling and everything possible is already done to transmit that information, what else can be done? Or all we have left is just wait?
You already do everything you can, and by decision of each one of you, you will continue to do it. Accept your limitation. It is what you can do and no more. If you begin to sacrifice yourself to help humanity, you will only end up feeding the problem with your own suffering. Accept what you can do and accept what you cannot do equally. Understand that it is not your responsibility to solve the problem, even though you are the last hope. Because you are not alone. There are more people out there working toward the same goal. It will not be very obvious, but there they are. In other words, you have the right to be happy and have a life, and not give yourselves bitterly to the cause. We can only do what we can, wait and watch. It is not your responsibility to carry the world on your shoulders, nor ours.
Same applies to you.
Okay, thanks Yazhi, I think the same. Although, one thing is still not clear to me, and sorry for insisting. Why 5D people, by having more creative power, by having their broader perception, don't have more power to change what happens in the world, and they need people on Earth to influence them from here? It is said that outside the Earth, the power of manifestation is greater than here. Here it is doughy. So why not work on influencing the Earthlings and their mirrors from there, where the power of manifestation is faster? Remember that a density is just a group of perception agreements, and what defines a higher density comparing to a lower one, 5D over 3D, is the amount of information that it processes as part of its existence that defines it. That information is because beings with those kinds of agreements have more consciousness, more memories, and more understanding than someone in a lower density. The greater the understanding, the greater the detail, the greater the movement of energy, the more rapid manifestation. Exactly. So, Why don't they apply their power of manifestation from above and instead need 3D humans to create things for them and change them? I'm referring here to what you said, that the Federation to change needs people on Earth, its mirrors, etc. Because even if we understand a lower density, we are not part of it, as you understand your sleeping relatives, but still you cannot change them, even if you explain everything with puppets.
So they are 3D people who can't process that information yet. Are they limited?
Yes, they are limited, so they do not manifest what they want. But the only thing that limits them is their own ideas that they are limited, and that is what they manifest, as I have already said 3/4 of a million times. Exactly, and up there they know that they are unlimited. That is why it is from there where the change would occur faster, and it would be reflected here below, because we are linked. Here the power of manifestation is slow. Even in 5D, they believe they are limited. But because they are in 5D, they believe that the limits are other than on Earth, therefore more expanded. But they still have the same problem. For example, ask Aneka if she can go through the wall.
That is, 5D influences 5D, but in this case it can't access the limited 3D thinking?
Yes, it can, but hardly. You need a portal of entry. That is something with a frequency according to 5D, but that can influence 3D as well. Starseeds again. Isn't it a lot that is required of people in 3D, when obviously people in 5D can't influence, for whatever reasons, those on Earth? It's just that the problem was generated from 3D. It can only be solved from 3D with a maturing of understanding.
Okay. In 5D, they cannot influence a collective consciousness of which they are not a part of. That is why they must form a part of it by coming here. But that generates a problem, which is the apparent limitation by ideas of those who are here, that those ideas of low frequencies take up to 5D. Did I understand?
If you look, for example, what happens if you leave your house and accidentally step on an ant and you didn't even notice? You are not guilty. You do not know, because you didn't get involved. But if you walk and see the ant, then you have already gotten involved in the problem. Now you already have karma with the ant. Now you must be careful not to step on it. This concept of karma is what the Andromedans use to justify not intervening. In itself, strictly speaking, it is perfectly valid. In the case of the Taigetans, they have already looked at the little ant. That's why they have the problem now. They have also looked at it. They are here. I don't see them exploring space elsewhere.
I think they only look at the part that interests them.
Exactly. Everyone can only see to the limits of their own understanding.
But then, how does this end? I do not see any other way but collapse. And that still will not prevent more souls from coming here to live this game. So entertaining for them.
We will see if the human unconscious can mature and expand fast enough to solve its own problem. Or we will witness a collapse that sooner or later will cause the emergence of another paradigm or more advanced matrix.
And what will happen to the awakened people whom the system attacks? Will they be dragged down by the collective unconscious? Or will a new reality be created for them?
Most likely, the human collective unconscious matrix will end up dragging them with them. But this is not over yet. The fight continues. The dice are in the air.
They are going to drag us down with them? I don't want that. I should be able to create my own reality by myself.
And you still can, and they can. Looking for how? Between the cracks of the very system. Not everything is lost. Again, everything is an idea. You are very powerful. The problem is that the total of the collective unconscious asks for what generates the problem to continue. The delegation of power, freedom, and human independence in exchange for protection against non-existent invisible problems that are only supported by ideas. The starseeds are spiritual guides. They can't do much more. However, the spiritual is the basis of everything. The only way to defeat this problem is to avoid separation. This means that you, the starseeds, lovingly integrate the Matrix people. I know they are the cause of the problem, but you should be smarter than them and not create family fragmentation, for example, because of the disagreements in ideas and understanding. Find ways to make people see the problem. For example, show them proof of something, not just tell them that you saw proof of that something. They are simple minds compared to your minds. So lead them to better understanding with small portions of revelatory things, visible evidence. Example, do not tell them that the masks do not work. Better show them how disgusting those masks are in terms of the collection of germs that they have with just a few minutes of use. So they will see the problem. It is not that you tell them about the problem. If they still want to breathe 80 types of microorganisms growing in the mask, it will be their decision, but they at least saw it. Okay, a doubt. The awakened starseeds are the ones here to fight against the system to change it. But all the other starseeds, broken shoes, that are not yet, let's say, awake, are they the ones that create this reality that we are seeing for the experience or whatever? Or do even the awakened starseeds create all this? Yes, they went in there as starseeds seeking the experience. Be that in reality, that is not necessary. Everyone who has to do with the Matrix feeds it. You feed it. I feed it through you. Here comes my other question I had. You say people ask for it. Yes, they became compatible with the parasite. But the parasite, or bacteria or whatever, is not there inside of us trying to manipulate us. It lets us be. And when our immune system goes down, that's when it attacks. But in the case of humans, why is our immune system low? Because that parasite is very much alive inside our body. It won't let us be. It does not attack only when we are low. It always attacks and is super aggressive. So it is not exactly equivalent to that example of the parasite that only attacks us when we are vulnerable. We are vulnerable among other things because the parasite is super active and has been for millennia. What you say is from the more complex point of view and understanding that you already have. From their understanding, they don't see any problem. They just want and ask to continue with a lifestyle to which they are accustomed, without being able to see the consequences of that lifestyle. You can see the trouble that lifestyle causes. That's why you are alarmed. But the Matrix people can't. Everything is fine by understanding only the official. And according to them, sooner or later, with the shots, the pandemic will end and they will return to normal. We talk about two different realities here, yours and theirs. You are the ones who want to change them and pull them towards understanding you, because it is better. But from their point of view, you are the foolish invaders who don't understand. Next day. Today, I prefer to start by taking questions if you want.
Very good. You say, Yazhi, that the problem was generated from 3D and it can only be solved from 3D with a maturation of understanding. Today, on the brink of another reset, oppression is generated by humans in victim mentality. If the Federation or whoever frees them, victimhood is perpetuated. And let's add to it that the very inhabitants of 5D do not understand or know. They are not aware of everything you say. But, just thinking, if humans were saved, wouldn't they be in a larger bubble? That of 5D, where in community, that feeling of victimhood and the need for being rescued can be defeated. Because this is not about the Federation saving us and leaving us locked up, but by leaving this 3D to 5D gradually or suddenly, we will all remember how eternal we are. We will reconnect with the source, and there we can begin re-education, since we will have the expanded framework to be able to believe in what we really are. Then, the construction of this ego will be relegated by the true eternal identity. What breaks with the narcissistic tendencies of me first. And therefore, the very mentality that defines the human race and its derived dependencies.
Okay, let's get rid of the moon bit first. It was a high-energy etheric barrier that did not allow, in the past, ship crew without frequency manipulation technology penetrated. However, it is regarded as a method of mental repression. Today, it is so weak that there is talk in the local federation to turn off the devices. But there will be no visible change from anywhere, not even from the Earth. They are useless, especially because the cabal, the regressives, whatever you call them, already pass the barrier all the time with portals, and if allowed, with ships as well. So what keeps 3D as 3D is the human mentality. Because a density is not a place, but a mentality, a perception. So as you say, yes, they would move to a larger bubble, that of the other 5D races. And yes, that is the final intention. The problem is that there is nothing to save humans from. They generate their own problem, so they are their own problem. The moment you get over this fact and realize how self-destructive they are with their thoughts and values, they would automatically become what we call 5D here. Remembering that there are no densities, and that is only an idea or agreement in people's minds, from one to many. Removing the lunar frequencies does not solve that problem. They are irrelevant. What is stopping humans from remembering and realizing all they are, what they were and what is going on, again, is their own mental programming, their ideas, their values, the mental control exercised over them. I repeat, exercised over them by the governments that they themselves have created, with the same attitude of delegating the decisions and heavy work to the authorities, assuming that they will do things for their well-being. But governments are not there to take care of humans, because those governments, whether the official ones or those behind, secret societies and all that, which is the true government, is the result of them, the people, and their way of being. So the monster they created returns to eat them. Because even the nerdy millionaires with syringes and the discreet all billionaires with names like Rothschild and Rockefeller, among others, are the result of the people. Why? Because those who come to power in a social scheme like the one we have on Earth must have very precise character traits, or they will not be able to climb the ranks of power. Those traits are having a brutal narcissism that carries other qualities, such as lack of empathy. So those who come to power are the worst representatives of humanity, and this happened through centuries, if not thousands of years. In fact, from circa 1310 BC. So humanity must ask itself, what happened that brought them to this current point on the brink of self-destruction? I insist that a person can only rise to power if they have defined personal aspects of narcissism, which they will also pass to their children, thus creating the classes of people who will logically rise to power, and thereby exploiting those who are not narcissistic, as happens even with personal relationships. An empathic codependent will almost always end up being exploited by a narcissist.
Very interesting about the moon. I understood that some buildings would indeed disappear, but of course, if they remained in people's mind, those minds will continue to create them.
Once created, they already sustain themselves, because they are already part of the matrix. They will already sustain the harmonics of a frequency that creates them. I think they would only disappear in some cases. I would see it more as that they will remain and only disappear from another angle, as in that they are no longer necessary. Therefore, as civilization advances towards something more positive, the buildings of large banks, for example, would disappear, although the building itself will remain to be used as a building of flats for the people, as houses. It would be necessary to look into that problem of the disappearance of things. For me, it is something more symbolic, like what I described above. The thing about buildings disappearing, but even cities were inserted by the computers, is what I understood before when Aneka explained it 3 years ago. Objects and buildings inserted from above wouldn't disappear then? Would change their purpose only? Yes, it is clear to me that once inserted, the same matrix feeds the harmonics to maintain those buildings or whatever. The problem is that not only does it remain as buildings, but the races artificially insert things to later be found and used for retro-engineering by the Earth factions that suit them, increasing the complexity of the problem. The insertion of opars or objects out of their time is a clear example of what I describe here.
Okay, going back to the previous thread. I understand that if humans are not helped, they will not learn. But the question is, if they are not helped, will they learn then?
Many already understand it, so those who don't will get caught up in their own creation. The problem is that yes, those who understand are not enough. They could be dragged down by those who do not understand. Helping them is only apparent. It does not solve the problem. In fact, it feeds it. Because humans are in a loop of believing themselves incapable of solving their problems. Therefore, that is what they get, the inability to face their problems. Helping them would only be seen by them as something they are entitled to, and they will immediately return to the same bad habits that created the problem in the first place. So what remains to be done is that humans, based on their own creation, see the problem and have to face the fact of having to solve everything on their own. Without correcting that mentality, you will never be able to implement a holographic society. It is incompatible with them. Today, the simple description of a holographic society is confused with socialism, testimony of their lack of collective consciousness, all for being engrossed in the me first, the destructive narcissism of modern human society.
Yazhi, it's that I thought that the idea of all this disclosure was to awaken as many as possible to save themselves, but also to save others. But looking at the situation, I think we end up being more drawn into their collective reality. We pay the price of not being able to change their thoughts, ideas, and ethics.
It's everyone's mission here. But my feeling is that those who would awaken have already awakened, and those who would not will not. Nowadays, everything is so clear that those who do not see it are blind. They will not wake up. So to continue, it is more about creating a union between the awakened, not fighting with each other over nonsense. That union is the key. And to be able to translate awakening into a language that the sleeping ones can handle, that is, to manipulate them so that with their same concepts and with their same belief framework, they can work together with the awakened ones. So we just have to give them what is necessary in terms of information that wakes them up and not plunge them into complex things that they would never understand and always pass as nonsense. That is why I have said more than once that saying that the information comes from extraterrestrials only discredits our entire effort. Sleeping people don't need to know that. They can't digest it. They can only see small things, like for example, the sea of disgusting microbes that live in their masks. And from there, they will start to realize that this only harms them and does not protect them from anything. That's the little bit of information as an example that they can handle. Not that an alien said it, because they will never believe it.
I have a question, although it may be a bit off the topic. Because if the people continue the way they are going, they will not be able to have a holographic society. My question is, all the holographic societies out there in 5D work fine, not considering the fact that the Federation does not want, cannot help? Does it function properly as an organization? Or is it us from here that don't interpret it well because we are not well and it is our reflection again?
Every culture and race has its own version of a holographic society, which is tailor-made for it and with its own requirements. In itself, almost all cultures in the so-called 5D use holographic society, even the so-called regressive races. They are not perfect, yes, there are problems, but the firm base is there, and that base is the mentality of the people, their union, and the lack of money, because money only fosters the scarcity and victim mentality and produces more narcissists. Therefore, it becomes a pyramid society. The interpretation of all information, no matter what it is, will always be under the lens of the understanding and conscience of the observer. His interpretation will be based on his knowledge and intellectual framework. So yes, misunderstanding how a holographic society works will be another reflection of humanity's social programming.
Thank you. But if you don't help them and they continue to destroy themselves, won't that create more trauma? And will that not accentuate their destructive ideas even more? It's that, for example, I see what they are doing here to young children. and I wonder how they're going to get out of this.
Yes, more trauma is being created. That is undeniable. It is what is expected to cause an awakening, the mass realization of things. But to get to that point, there will necessarily be trauma and suffering. Suffering itself is a great driver of development. It doesn't have to be that way, but with the intellectual level of humanity, I don't see any other way. So yes, I see that they get out of the problem as a group, but at a very great cost in lives. Life is suffering, but we cannot escape it. The only thing we can do is give life and our actions within it a meaning so strong that it makes the inescapable suffering worthwhile. Above you said that the root of the problem is the brutal narcissism that makes the wrong people rise to power, and that behind there is money. Do you know how money was really created? Who has planted the idea on Earth? Because it wasn't here before in the days of Atlantis and Lemuria. It is said that money was a Maitre creation to control humanity. This is accepted by the extraterrestrials of the Federation. I see it differently. Money was a concept that grew from barter little by little as a means of interaction within a social structure and terrestrial matrix reality, adapted to the perception of scarcity, thus creating one more trap for humans and of their own creation. Again, saying that Maitre gave them the money is a victim mentality. Take the concept of money to another planet and see how people receive it. There you will see the mentality of each race.
So we will leave here fighting, hoping that our families will imitate our actions, knowing what awaits us and what awaits them, knowing that we were not enough for now, hoping to be a sufficient example for those who will come.
It is very possible that this is the outcome for the awakened ones, yes. However, there is still hope that the masses will realize the deceptions in time before society collapses. It will depend on them.